Captain Dae-hyun Park stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution and watched the stars through the massive view screen. The Fortress-class battleship was one of humanity's most powerful weapons, a giant metal beast that could destroy entire fleets. For 15 years, ships like this one had patrolled the edges of human space, making sure no alien ever came close to Earth again. The war with the Hegemony Alliance was over, but the scars remained deep in every human heart. The bridge was quiet, except for the soft hum of computers and the occasional beep from monitoring stations. Commander Hyeri Nam sat at her post, watching the long-range sensors with the focus of a hawk hunting prey. Lieutenant Woo-jin Kim managed the weapon systems, his hands never far from the firing controls. Intelligence Officer So-min Lee analyzed data streams from the network of warning buoys that surrounded human territory like an electronic fence. These 4 people, along with their crew of 3,000, were the guardians of a promise humanity had made to itself after the war. Never again would aliens threaten Earth. The Dead Zone, as other species called it, stretched 50 light-years, in every direction from Earth. No alien ship had crossed that boundary since the Treaty of Titan was signed in blood and fire. The automated warning buoys spoke their message in 17 different alien languages, but the meaning was always the same. Turn back or die. Most aliens listened. Those who didn't became space dust, their remains floating as a reminder to anyone foolish enough to test human resolve. Dae-hyun had been fighting aliens since he was 18 years old. He remembered the burning cities on Earth, the screaming children, the bodies stacked like firewood in the streets of Seoul. The Hegemony Alliance had come to Earth expecting easy conquest, thinking humans were just another primitive species to be enslaved or destroyed. They learned too late that humans fight differently when their backs are against the wall. They fight with a fury that turns ordinary people into legends and makes heroes out of cowards. The captain was thinking about his daughter Minji, who lived on Earth and had never seen an alien except in history books when Commander Nam's voice cut through his memories like a knife. Captain, long-range sensors are picking up an unidentified contact. Bearing 27 Mark IV, distance approximately 8 light hours and closing. Her voice was steady, but Dae-hyun could hear the tension underneath. After 15 years of peace, any contact was cause for alarm. Classification? Dae-hyun moved to the tactical display, where a small red dot pulsed against the star field. The dot was moving steadily toward the inner system, ignoring the invisible boundary that marked the beginning of the dead zone. Woo-jin's fingers danced across his console. Unknown configuration, Captain. The hull design doesn't match any known hegemony species. It's organic-looking, almost like it grew instead of being built. Mass readings suggest a large vessel, possibly a cruiser or transport. So-min looked up from her station, her face pale. Sir, I'm detecting multiple life signs aboard that vessel. Over 200 individual readings, all showing as non-human biology. This isn't a scout or patrol ship. The bridge fell silent. 200 aliens heading straight for Earth was either an invasion force or something else entirely. Given humanity's reputation, any species planning an attack would send more ships and better weapons. But if they weren't planning to fight, why were they entering the dead zone? Have they responded to any of our warning transmissions? Dae-hyun asked, though he already knew the answer from the grim expressions around him. Negative, sir, Nam reported. The automated buoys have been broadcasting warnings for the past 6 hours. The alien vessel hasn't changed course or made any attempt to communicate. They're ignoring us completely. Dae-hyun felt the familiar cold weight settling in his stomach. He had hoped never to feel it again. That sick anticipation that came before battle. But here it was, as sharp and bitter as ever. Time to breach the perimeter? At current speed, approximately 14 hours, Woo-jin answered. They'll cross the 50 light-year mark just after 0800 tomorrow. The captain stared at the red dot on his screen and tried to think of any reason why aliens would enter human space uninvited. Trade was conducted at neutral stations far from Earth. Diplomatic meetings happened in carefully controlled environments with massive human fleets providing security. The only aliens who came to the dead zone uninvited were those planning to attack or those who had given up all hope of living. Get me Admiral Jang on the secure channel, Dae-hyun ordered, and send a priority alert to Earth Command. We have a code black situation developing. The next few hours passed like a slow nightmare. Admiral Kyunghwan Jang's face appeared on the communication screen, his weathered features showing the same concern that Dae-hyun felt. The Admiral had fought in the war's bloodiest battles and carried scars both visible and hidden. He was one of the few people alive who understood the true cost of humanity's victory. "Captain Park, I've reviewed your sensor data," the Admiral said. "My orders are simple and absolute. The integrity of the dead zone must be maintained at all costs. No alien vessel can be allowed to survive contact with our defensive perimeter. If they won't turn back, destroy them." "Sir, the life sign readings suggest this might be a civilian vessel," Dae-hyun replied carefully. "Over 200 beings aboard, including what appear to be juveniles based on the bioscanner results." The Admiral's expression hardened. "Captain, I don't care if they're carrying alien babies and puppy dogs. The moment they crossed into our territory without permission, they became hostile contacts. Our entire defensive strategy depends on the absolute certainty that entering human space means death. One exception, one moment of mercy, and every species in the galaxy will think they can test our resolve." Dae-hyun knew the Admiral was right from a strategic perspective. The dead zone worked because it was absolute. Aliens stayed away from human space, not because they respected humanity's borders, but because they feared the consequences of crossing them. Fear was a more reliable guardian than treaties or diplomacy. But staring at those bio readings, thinking about 200 living beings heading toward their deaths, made his chest tight with something he hadn't felt in years. Doubt. "Understood, sir. We'll intercept and destroy the contact before it can penetrate further into the system." "Good. And Captain, make sure the destruction is visible to any long-range observers. Let the galaxy see what happens to uninvited guests." The channel closed, leaving Dae-hyun alone with his orders and his conscience. He looked around the bridge at his crew, people who trusted him to make the right decisions. Nam was running tactical assessments, calculating the most efficient way to destroy the alien vessel. Woo Jin was charging the main weapon systems, preparing for a battle that would be over in seconds. Soman was monitoring communications, watching for any last-minute surrender or explanation that might change everything. But as the hours passed and the alien ship continued its steady approach, no messages came. The vessel maintained course and speed, either unaware of its approaching doom or accepting it with alien resignation. Dae-hyun found himself wondering what could drive someone to fly into certain death. What kind of desperation or hope or madness would make someone point their ship at the most dangerous place in the galaxy and never slow down? The answer came 12 hours later, when the alien vessel finally crossed the perimeter and long-range scanners got their first clear look at the hull. The ship was damaged, its organic curves scarred by weapons fire and something else, something that looked like bite marks from a creature the size of a moon. Escape pods were scattered around the main vessel like seeds blown from a dying flower, each one carrying a handful of refugees toward what they hoped was safety, but what Dae-hyun knew was death. "Captain," Soman's voice was barely a whisper, "I'm picking up a transmission. It's weak and heavily distorted, but I think they're asking for help." The transmission crackled with static and alien voices, speaking in desperate tones that needed no translation. Major Jinwoo Choi had heard that sound before during the war, when human cities burned and mothers carried dead children through the rubble. Fear was the same in any language, and the voices coming from the alien ship carried enough fear to fill an ocean. "Ion cannons are charged and ready, Captain," Woo Jin reported from his weapons station. "The Retribution's main guns could turn the alien vessel into particles in less than 3 seconds. But something made Dae-hyun hesitate. The ship ahead of them was dying, its hull cracked and bleeding atmosphere into the void. Whatever had damaged it was far worse than anything humans had ever built. Commander Nam studied her tactical display with growing confusion. "Sir, the vessel is launching more pods. I count 37 escape craft, all heading in different directions. It's like they're trying to scatter their population as widely as possible." "That's not an attack pattern," Soman observed from her intelligence station. "It's an evacuation. They're abandoning their ship and hoping some of them might survive whatever happens next." Dae-hyun watched the tactical display and felt something shift in his chest. These aliens weren't invaders or conquistadors. They were refugees running from something that scared them more than the legendary fury of humanity. But orders were orders, and the dead zone had to remain absolute. Every alien in the galaxy knew that entering human space meant death, and exceptions would only encourage others to test their luck. "Major Choi, prepare a boarding team," the captain ordered. "I want to know what we're dealing with before we destroy them. If they're carrying some kind of weapon or plague, Earth Command needs to know about it." Jinwoo nodded and began selecting his Marines. He chose veterans who had fought aliens before and wouldn't hesitate if things went wrong. The boarding pods launched 20 minutes later, small armored ships designed to cut through enemy hulls and deliver human soldiers into the heart of enemy vessels. The alien ship offered no resistance as the marine pods attached to its hull and began cutting their way inside. Jinwoo led his team through corridors that looked more like the inside of a giant tree than a spacecraft. The walls curved and flowed like living wood, and bioluminescent panels provided soft, organic light. It was beautiful in a way that made his skin crawl. "This place gives me the creeps," Sergeant Hana Seo muttered over the comm. She was the team's linguistics specialist, equipped with translation software that could handle most known alien languages. "It's like we're walking through the belly of some giant beast." The first aliens they encountered were huddled in what looked like a nursery. Small creatures with large eyes and delicate features cowered behind furniture that seemed to have grown from the floor. They made soft, chittering sounds that the translation software identified as expressions of terror and pleas for mercy. "These are children," Hana whispered. "They're just kids, Major." Jinwoo had seen alien children before during the war, usually right before his orders required him to kill them. The hegemony species had used their young as human shields, knowing that some humans would hesitate to fire on children. That hesitation had cost human lives, and Jinwoo had learned to push his conscience aside when duty demanded it. But these creatures weren't hiding behind their children. They were protecting them with their own bodies, just like humans would. The Marines moved deeper into the ship, finding more groups of aliens in various states of exhaustion and terror. The adults were tall and graceful, with skin that shimmered, like oil on water, and hands that ended in delicate, artistic fingers. They wore simple clothing that seemed to be made from the same organic material as their ship, and they carried no weapons that the Marines could identify. In what appeared to be the ship's command center, they found an elderly alien sitting before a control panel that pulsed with soft colors. The creature looked up as the Marines entered, and its large eyes showed resignation rather than fear. It spoke in a musical language that the translation software struggled to process. "It's saying something about the Great Devourer," Hana reported. "The translation is rough, but I think it's trying to explain why they're here. Something about their home being consumed, their people scattered across space looking for sanctuary." "Great Devourer?" Jinwoo asked. "Is that some kind of weapon?" The aliens seemed to understand the question, even through the translation barrier. It activated a holographic display that showed a star system, beautiful and vibrant with multiple worlds orbiting a yellow sun. Then the display changed, showing the same system as a collection of dead gray spheres orbiting a dim, flickering star. The alien spoke again, its voice filled with a sadness that transcended species barriers. "It says the Great Devourer came to their system 3 cycles ago," Hana translated. "It consumed everything. The plants, the animals, even the energy from their star. The survivors fled in whatever ships they could find, hoping to reach someplace safe. And they chose human space?" Jinwoo couldn't hide his disbelief. "Everyone in the galaxy knows we kill aliens on sight." The alien's response came through the translator as something like, "We heard stories that humans defeated the Great Alliance of 12 species. We hoped that beings strong enough to face such odds might show mercy to those who mean no harm." Back on the Retribution, Captain Daehyun received Major Choi's report with a growing sense of unease. The aliens were calling themselves the Kethmori, and their story was either the truth or the most elaborate deception ever attempted. According to their spokesman, an individual whose name translated roughly as Keeper of Memories, they were the survivors of 17 different worlds, all consumed by something they called the Great Devourer. "Captain," Admiral Jiang's face appeared. On the communication screen, his expression as hard as steel. "I've been monitoring your team's transmissions. These aliens are either the greatest liars in galactic history, or they're telling the truth about some kind of galaxy-spanning threat. Either way, they entered our space without permission and they need to be eliminated. Sir, if their story is accurate, we might be dealing with something that makes the Hegemony Alliance look like a minor inconvenience, Daehyun replied carefully. Perhaps we should consider bringing a few of them back to Earth for interrogation, the Pwai. Admiral's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. Captain Park, I'm going to explain this one more time. The moment we show mercy to uninvited aliens, every species in the galaxy will assume they can enter our space whenever they have a sob story to tell. Today, it's refugees fleeing some mysterious threat. Tomorrow, it's traders claiming engine trouble. Next week, it's a diplomatic mission that forgot to request permission. The dead zone works because it's absolute. No exceptions, no mercy, no survivors. Admiral Jang is correct, came another voice, and Defense Minister Minji Kang's image appeared, alongside the admiral's. She was one of the architects of humanity's isolation policy, a woman who had lost 3 children during the Hegemony War and never forgiven the galaxy for existing. Captain Park, you have your orders. Destroy the alien vessel and all escape pods. Make it spectacular enough that the galaxy remembers why they fear us. Daehyun looked at the tactical display, where dozens of small red dots represented alien families trying desperately to reach safety. Each dot was a group of beings who had lost everything and traveled across the galaxy hoping that humanity might be different from the stories they'd heard. He thought about his own daughter, safe on Earth because people like him stood guard at the borders of human space and killed anyone who tried to cross them. Major Choi, return to the Retribution immediately, he ordered. All pods prepare for emergency departure. As his Marines evacuated the alien ship, Daehyun found himself staring at a message that had appeared on his personal communication screen. It was from his daughter Minji, now 23 and working as a teacher on Earth. The message was simple. Happy birthday, Dad. I hope you're staying safe out there. I'm proud of what you do, protecting people who can't protect themselves. The Captain closed his eyes and tried to imagine explaining to his daughter why he had killed 200 alien children who were running from something called the Great Devourer. He tried to picture her face when he told her about the choice between duty and mercy, about the necessity of absolute borders and the price of maintaining fear. When he opened his eyes, Admiral Jang was staring at him from the communications screen with growing suspicion. Captain, why haven't you opened fire? Your orders were clear. Admiral, I'm transmitting a data package to Earth Command, Daehyun said quietly. The alien story needs to be verified. If there really is something out there consuming entire star systems, humanity needs to know about it. Captain Park, you are relieving yourself of command if you continue down this path, the Admiral warned. Fire on that vessel immediately or I'll have you arrested for treason. Daehyun looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. Commander Nam was watching him with understanding in her eyes. Lieutenant Wu Jin's hand hovered over the firing controls, waiting for an order that might never come. Intelligence officer. Soman had tears running down her cheeks as she listened to the alien children crying over the communication channels. President Yongsik Bae stood in the Situation Room deep beneath the Earth Defense Command Complex, staring at holographic displays that showed the alien refugee ship hanging motionless in space, while 2 human fleets faced each other across the void. Captain Park's refusal to fire had created the first military standoff in human space since the end of the war, and every second of delay made the situation more dangerous. Mr. President, we have confirmed reports that Admiral Jang is moving the Soul's Fury to intercept Captain Park's position, Defense Minister Minji Kang reported. Her voice carried the same cold efficiency that had made her one of humanity's most effective military leaders. He's carrying explicit orders to destroy the alien vessel and arrest Captain Park for insubordination. The Situation Room was filled with the most powerful people in human government, but none of them seemed to know how to handle a crisis that involved choosing between mercy and survival. General Sang-hoon impaced behind the tactical displays, his weathered face showing the strain of trying to balance military necessity with human conscience. Chief Scientist Taehyun No sat quietly at his workstation, analyzing the data streams coming from the refugee ship with growing alarm. What do we know about this great devourer? President Bae asked. Is it real, or just some elaborate alien deception? Dr. Ji-Young Han, humanity's leading expert on alien biology, looked up from her analysis with pale, frightened eyes. "Mr. President, the biological samples that Major Choi's team collected from the alien ship tell a story that's almost impossible to believe. These creatures show signs of extreme radiation exposure, genetic damage consistent with proximity to some kind of energy-draining phenomenon, and cellular degradation that suggests they've been exposed to something that literally consumes life. Force. That could be faked," Intelligence Director Sung Jae Oh interjected. "The aliens could have exposed themselves to radiation and chemicals to make their story more believable. We can't trust anything they tell us." "Sir," Dr. Han continued, "I've analyzed tissue samples from 17 different Kethmori individuals, including juveniles who were born during their flight from their home system. The genetic markers are consistent across all samples, and the damage patterns match what we would expect from exposure to some kind of stellar parasitism. These aren't actors putting on a performance. These are survivors of something that consumed their entire civilization." Fleet Admiral Changmin Yu activated a galactic display that showed human space as a small blue sphere surrounded by the vast darkness of unexplored territory. Based on the refugees' navigation records, their home system was located approximately 400 light-years from Earth. If something consumed their worlds and they represent survivors from multiple systems, we're looking at a phenomenon that spans thousands of cubic light-years. "How long would something like that take to reach human space?" President Bay asked, though he dreaded the answer. "At the expansion rate described by the refugees, approximately 43 years, Admiral," Ik replied, "but that assumes linear expansion. If this great devourer is intelligent and can accelerate its consumption rate by learning from each civilization it destroys, it could reach us much sooner." The room fell silent as everyone contemplated the implications. 43 years seemed like a long time, but humanity had spent the last 15 years believing they were safe behind their wall of fear and isolation. The idea that something could be coming that would make the hegemony war look like a minor skirmish was almost too terrifying to consider. "We need more information," President Bay decided. "Dr. No, what can you tell us about the energy signatures the refugees described?" The chief scientist activated his displays, showing wave patterns and energy readings that looked like the heartbeat of something vast and hungry. "Mr. President, our deep space monitoring stations have been recording anomalous energy signatures for the past 8 months. We assumed they were natural phenomena, cosmic events too distant to concern us. But when I compare them to the descriptions provided by the Kethmori, the patterns match almost perfectly." "How many signatures?" General Im asked. 17 confirmed, possibly as many as 24, Dr. No replied. "All located in different sectors, all showing the same energy drain patterns. Whatever this thing is, it's not operating in just one location. It's active across multiple regions of the galaxy simultaneously." Defense Minister Kong leaned forward, her face hard with determination. "Gentlemen, we're missing the important point. Even if this great devourer is real, even if it's coming for us eventually, that doesn't change our immediate situation. We have aliens in our space without permission, and our entire defensive strategy depends on maintaining absolute borders. If we show mercy to these refugees, every species in the galaxy will assume they can enter human territory whenever they have a crisis." "Minji has a point," General Im agreed reluctantly. "Our reputation for ruthlessness is what keeps potential enemies at bay. The moment aliens think they can appeal to human compassion, we become vulnerable to infiltration, deception, and gradual erosion of our defenses." Intelligence Director O pulled up classified reports from across human space. "We're already seeing increased alien activity near our borders. Long-range sensors show at least 6 different species conducting what appear to be reconnaissance missions along our perimeter. They're testing our responses, looking for weaknesses. If word spreads that we've shown mercy to uninvited guests, those reconnaissance missions will become invasion fleets." President Bay walked to the main display, where the image of the alien refugee ship rotated slowly, its organic curves scarred by whatever had driven it across the galaxy. He thought about his own grandchildren, safe in schools on Earth because people like Captain Park stood guard at the borders of human space. But he also thought about the alien children aboard that ship, who had done nothing wrong except be born into a universe that was apparently far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. What if we found a middle path? He asked quietly. What? If we maintained our reputation for absolute borders, while also gathering intelligence about this great devourer? Such as? Admiral Yu asked. We allow a small number of refugees to survive under strict containment and monitoring, the president explained. We study them, learn everything they know about this threat, and use that information to prepare our defenses. Meanwhile, we make it clear to the galaxy that our mercy comes with conditions. Anyone seeking sanctuary in human space must provide complete intelligence about galactic threats and submit to permanent monitoring. Those who lie or attempt deception will be eliminated immediately and publicly. General Im considered the proposal. It could work if we present it correctly. We're not showing weakness or compassion. We're demonstrating that humanity is intelligent enough to gather information about potential threats while maintaining absolute control over our territory. The refugees would become intelligence assets rather than charity cases. Intelligence Director O agreed. We could establish a containment facility in the asteroid belt, far from Earth but within our defensive perimeter. Anyone seeking sanctuary would be required to provide complete cooperation with our intelligence services. Defense Minister Kang remained skeptical. And what happens when the next group of refugees arrives? And the group after that? How many alien populations can we support while maintaining the fiction that human space is absolutely forbidden? We establish clear criteria, President Bay replied. Refugees must provide actionable intelligence about threats to human security. They must submit to permanent monitoring and accept that any deception will result in immediate termination. And most importantly, we limit the program to genuine existential threats. Species fleeing economic problems or political persecution get turned away. Only those with information about galaxy-level dangers are considered for sanctuary. Dr. Han looked up from her analysis workstation. Mr. President, there's something else you need to consider. The Kethmori refugees aren't the only survivors out there. Based on their testimony, dozens of species have been displaced by the Great Devourer. If even a fraction of them try to reach human space, we could be looking at multiple refugee crises over the coming years. Then we better start learning how to handle them intelligently, the president said. Admiral Yu, send new orders to Captain Park. He's authorized to establish a temporary containment facility for up to 50 Kethmori refugees. The rest will be relocated to neutral space with sufficient supplies to reach other potential sanctuaries. Make it clear that this is not mercy, it's intelligence gathering. And Admiral Zhang? General Im asked. We'll stand down and return to Earth for debriefing, President Bay replied firmly. We can't have our fleet commanders making unilateral decisions about galactic policy. This situation requires coordination between military and civilian leadership. As the meeting began to break up, Dr. No approached the president with additional data that made his face even more grave. Sir, there's one more thing you need to know. The energy signatures we've been detecting aren't just growing stronger, they're showing signs of organization, of intelligence. Whatever the Great Devourer is, it's not just consuming civilizations randomly, it's selecting targets based on some kind of strategic assessment. 6 months after the first refugees arrived, Sanctuary Station hung in the asteroid belt like a metal flower blooming in the darkness of space. Dr. Yunbi Park walked through the habitat modules where 47 Kethmori survivors were learning to live under human protection, and she marveled at how quickly both species had adapted to their strange new relationship. The station itself was a marvel of engineering, constructed from prefabricated modules and asteroid mining equipment in just 4 months. Captain Do-Yun Song commanded the defense force that protected the facility, a mixed unit of human marines, and Kethmori warriors who had volunteered to help defend their new home. The cultural exchange had produced unexpected benefits, with both species learning from each other's approaches to technology, warfare, and survival. Dr. Park, you need to see this, called Chief Engineer Youngman On from his workstation in the main laboratory. He was analyzing samples of Kethmori biotechnology, trying to understand how their living ships could repair themselves and adapt to different environments. The implications for human space travel were enormous, but the integration process had proven more dangerous than anyone anticipated. The first breakthrough had come when Veltar, the Kethmori military commander, had offered to share their adaptive shielding technology with humanity. The living energy barriers could adjust their frequency and density based on incoming threats, making them potentially superior to anything humans had ever developed. But when Commander Sun Hee-oh volunteered to test pilot the first hybrid fighter craft, something had gone terribly wrong. The biointegration killed her, Dr. Park said quietly, reviewing the medical records for the 20th time. The Kethmori neural interface was incompatible with human brain chemistry. Instead of creating a connection between pilot and ship, it created a feedback loop that burned out her nervous system in less than 30 seconds. Youngmin nodded grimly. We've lost 6 volunteer pilots so far, and we're no closer to understanding why the technology works for them but kills us. Their biology is just too different from ours. What looks like a simple neural link to them is like plugging a human brain directly into a power reactor. The deaths had been devastating for morale on both sides. The Kethmori felt responsible for the human casualties, while the human crews began to view the alien technology with suspicion and fear. Dr. Park had been working around the clock to find a solution, but every attempt at creating a safe interface had ended in failure. Maybe we're approaching this wrong, she said, pulling up holographic displays of both human and Kethmori neural structures. Instead of trying to adapt their technology to work with human biology, what if we developed hybrid systems that neither species could use alone? Before Youngmin could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Captain Song's voice echoed over the communication system. All hands to alert stations. We have multiple contacts approaching the station, unknown configuration and intent. Dr. Park rushed to the command center where Captain Song and his staff were analyzing sensor readings from 3 alien vessels approaching Sanctuary Station. The ships were different from the Kethmori design, angular and metallic instead of organic, but they were broadcasting the same type of distress signals that had brought the first refugees to human space. Species identification? Song asked his sensor operator. 2 different configurations, Captain, Intelligence Officer Junseo Baek replied. The lead vessel appears to be from a species called the Vorthok, based on hull markings and energy signatures. The other 2 ships are from a group calling themselves the Zalani Collective. Both groups are claiming refugee status and requesting sanctuary. Dr. Park felt her stomach clench. The Kethmori had been a manageable test case, a single species fleeing a specific threat. But if multiple alien civilizations were being displaced by the Great Devourer, Sanctuary Station could quickly become overwhelmed with refugees seeking human protection. Are they telling the truth? Song asked. Veltar, the Kethmori commander, joined them in the command center. His large eyes showed deep concern as he studied the sensor readings. Captain Song, my people have heard of both the Vorthak and the Zalani. They were proud warrior cultures, strong enough to resist the Hegemony Alliance during your Great War. If they are fleeing their homeworlds, the Great Devourer has grown much stronger than we feared. The first group to board the station were Vorthak. Refugees, tall reptilian beings with armored scales and multiple arms that ended in clawed hands designed for both delicate work and combat. Their leader, whose name translated as Shield-Bearer of the Northern Clans, spoke through translation software with a voice like grinding stone. Humans of the Sanctuary Station, we come seeking protection from the Great Devourer that consumed our 7 worlds. We offer our knowledge of defensive warfare and siege tactics in exchange for shelter and the right to rebuild our civilization under your protection. The Zalani were even more unusual, crystalline beings whose bodies seemed to be made of living mineral that could reshape itself based on their emotional state. Their spokesman's form shifted from blue to deep red as he described the destruction of their homeworlds, the colors apparently indicating different types of distress and grief. The Devourer came to our system as we slept, the Zalani explained through their own translation device. It consumed our star first, draining its energy until our worlds became frozen tombs. We had prepared for war against organic enemies, but how do you fight something that feeds on the very forces that power life itself? Dr. Gaeon Kim, the station's xenobiology specialist, worked frantically to process biological samples from both new refugee groups while also trying to verify their stories. What she found confirmed humanity's worst fears about the scope of the threat they were facing. The cellular damage patterns are consistent across all 3 species, she reported to Captain Song and Dr. Park. But the Vorthak and Zalani refugees show more recent exposure to the energy-draining phenomenon. Based on the degradation markers, I estimate their homeworlds were consumed within the past 6 months. 6 months? Dr. Park felt the blood drain from her face. The Kethmori told us their worlds were destroyed 3 years ago, If the Great Devourer has consumed multiple civilizations in just the past 6 months, it's accelerating its expansion rate. Captain Song called an emergency meeting with Earth Command, bringing together President Bay, Defense Minister Kang, and the other key decision-makers who had authorized the Sanctuary Station experiment. The holographic displays showed the current refugee population: 47 Kethmori, 32 Vorthak, and 28 Zilani survivors, all looking to humanity for protection from a threat that seemed to grow stronger with each victory. "Mr. President, we're approaching our stated capacity limit," Song reported. "The station was designed to support 50 refugees maximum. We're already over that number, and long-range sensors are detecting at least 4 more vessels approaching our position. Word is spreading through the galaxy that humans are offering sanctuary to refugees fleeing the Great Devourer." "What's the status of intelligence gathering?" President Bay asked. "Mixed results, sir," Intelligence Officer Bayek replied. "The refugees are cooperating fully with our information requests, but their stories are becoming increasingly alarming. The Great Devourer isn't just consuming worlds randomly. It appears to be systematically targeting the most advanced civilizations first, and it's learning from each conquest." Dr. Kim activated her biological analysis displays. "Sir, I've made a discovery that changes everything we thought we knew about this threat. The Great Devourer isn't a single entity. Based on genetic markers found in tissue samples from all 3 refugee species, it appears to be some kind of collective intelligence made up of absorbed biological and technological components from every civilization it has consumed." "Meaning what exactly?" Defense Minister Kang asked. "It knows everything that its victims knew," Dr. Kim explained. "Every technology, every tactical doctrine, every cultural weakness. The Kethmori refugees remember their final battles, where the enemy forces used modified versions of their own weapons against them. The Vorthak describe attackers that employed their traditional siege tactics with perfect precision. The Zilani faced enemies that could predict their crystalline transformation patterns and counter them exactly. The implications were staggering. Humanity's entire defensive strategy was based on the assumption that they would be fighting alien enemies who didn't understand human psychology, tactics, or technology. But if the Great Devourer had already absorbed dozens of advanced civilizations, it would know everything about warfare, strategy, and the strengths and weaknesses of organic life. "How long before it reaches human space?" President Bay asked. Commander Inhuan Lee, who had been analyzing the expansion patterns, answered with barely controlled fear in his voice. "Based on the new data from our refugees, the Great Devourer is consuming approximately 1 major civilization every 3 weeks. At that rate, assuming it continues moving toward galactic core worlds, it will reach the outer edges of human space in less than 2 years. 2 years? General Im looked like he had been punched in the stomach. "We were planning for 40 years of preparation time." Admiral Min-seok Kang stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, flagship of the largest fleet humanity had ever assembled, and watched as refugee vessels from 17 different species took their positions alongside human warships. The combined fleet stretched across space like a metal constellation, over 800 vessels united by desperation, and the growing realization that they were probably going to die fighting an enemy none of them truly understood. The past 18 months had transformed human space from an isolated fortress into the galaxy's last sanctuary for civilizations fleeing the Great Devourer. Sanctuary Station had expanded into a massive complex housing over 3,000 refugees, while similar facilities orbited Mars, Jupiter, and the outer planets. Each group of survivors brought new horror stories about the entity that was systematically consuming the galaxy, but they also brought technology, tactics, and most importantly, hope. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting the probe," Captain Minyo Jeon reported from his position at the tactical station. The probe ship was unlike anything in the fleet's databases, a writhing mass of organic and mechanical components that seemed to shift and adapt as it moved through space. It was small, no larger than a human frigate, but the energy readings coming from it suggested power levels that should have required a vessel 10 times its size. Dr. Yejin Choi had been working for months on humanity's secret weapon, a theoretical device based on the unique neural architecture that made humans different from every other known species. The entity that called itself the Great Devourer could absorb and replicate the knowledge, technology, and even the thought patterns of every civilization it consumed. But there was one thing it had never encountered: true altruistic sacrifice. The pay. "Targeting system is ready, Admiral," Dr. Choi reported from her station near the Weapon Control Center. The device looked deceptively simple, a crystalline structure barely larger than a human head, but its operation required something that no machine could provide. Living beings had to willingly merge their consciousness with the targeting system, essentially trading their lives for the chance to wound something that might be immortal. The volunteers came from every species in the fleet: HFY warriors, who had lost their homeworlds; Vorthak champions, who chose death with honor over life in exile; Zelani crystal shapers, who believed their sacrifice might preserve their people's memory; and humans, always humans, who seemed to find in hopeless battles the very thing that made them most alive. Commander Ji-Young Park, no relation to the captain who had first spared the HFY refugees, led the volunteer squadron. She was 26 years old, the daughter of farmers from Earth who had never seen an alien until the refugees arrived. But she had studied the reports from Sanctuary Station, had listened to the stories of entire civilizations being consumed by something that turned their own knowledge against them, and had volunteered for a mission that would certainly end in death. "All volunteer squadrons report ready, Admiral," she transmitted from her fighter craft. Behind her flew a mixed formation of human pilots and alien warriors, all linked to Dr. Choi's experimental weapon through neural interfaces that would burn out their brains the moment the device activated. They knew this, had been told repeatedly that there was no chance of survival. But still they had volunteered. The probe ship suddenly accelerated, its twisted form shifting into a configuration that suggested attack rather than observation. Energy. Signatures spiked across the electromagnetic spectrum as the entity began scanning the combined fleet, analyzing their weapons, their formations, their communications protocols. It was learning, just as the refugees had described, absorbing everything it could about humanity's military capabilities. "It's transmitting," Communications Officer Woo Jin Kim reported. "The signal is complex, multi-dimensional. I think it's sending everything it learns back to the main force." Admiral Kang had studied every report about the Great Devourer, had listened to the testimony of survivors from 43 different species, and had come to understand that this enemy was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. It wasn't driven by territorial ambition, or resource competition, or even hatred. It simply existed to consume, to grow, to turn every form of life and intelligence in the galaxy into components of itself. But humanity had something the Great Devourer had never encountered. In all its millions of years of existence, the willingness to sacrifice everything for strangers. The entity could absorb the knowledge and technology of every species it consumed, but it couldn't understand why humans would die to protect alien refugees they had met only months ago. "Dr. Choi, begin the targeting sequence," Admiral Kang ordered, the weapon activated with a sound like crystalline bells singing in harmony. Across the fleet, volunteer pilots felt the neural interfaces connecting their minds to the targeting system, linking their consciousness directly to a device designed to exploit the one weakness the Great Devourer might possess. The entity absorbed and replicated everything it encountered, but it had never tried to absorb something that chose to be consumed for the sake of others. Commander Park felt her mind expanding as the interface activated, her consciousness touching the minds of every other volunteer in the squadron. She could feel the HFY warrior flying beside her, his thoughts filled with memories of children playing in organic cities that no longer existed. She sensed the Vorthak champion, whose clan had guarded the same mountain pass for 3,000 years until the day it was consumed by something that turned the very stones against them. The probe ship seemed to sense the change in the fleet's energy patterns. Its scanning intensified, and new configurations began appearing on its hull as it tried to analyze and counter whatever the humans were preparing. But for the first time since it had begun its galactic harvest, the Great Devourer encountered something it couldn't immediately understand or replicate. "Target acquired," Dr. Choi announced. "All volunteer squadrons, you are authorized to merge with the targeting matrix." The crystalline weapon pulsed with light as over 200 minds willingly joined the targeting system, their individual consciousness merging into something greater than the sum of its parts. The Great Devourer probe tried to scan and analyze this new phenomenon, but discovered something that made no sense according to its understanding of organic behavior. These beings were choosing to die not for their own species or their own survival, but for the abstract concept of protecting others. The weapon fired not as energy or projectiles, but as pure information. It transmitted the collected consciousness of every volunteer directly into the probe ship's central processing matrix, forcing the Great Devourer to experience something completely alien to its nature, the willingness to sacrifice everything for beings you barely know. The probe ship convulsed, its shifting hull freezing in patterns of confusion and pain. For the first time in its existence, the Great Devourer had absorbed something it couldn't process or integrate. The volunteer's consciousness was too alien, too fundamentally different from anything in its vast database of consumed civilizations. "Direct hit," Captain John reported with amazement. "The probe it's not responding normally. Its energy patterns are fluctuating wildly." But victory came at the predicted price. Across the volunteer squadron, neural interfaces burned out in cascades of light and electricity. Commander Park's last thought before her consciousness merged permanently with the weapon was of her parents' farm on Earth, and her hope that they would understand why she had chosen to die fighting beside aliens for the chance to wound something that might be immortal. The probe ship suddenly accelerated away from the fleet, its movements erratic and purposeless. It had come to gather intelligence about humanity's military capabilities, but instead had encountered something that challenged the fundamental assumptions the Great Devourer had made about organic life. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission," Communications Officer Kim reported. "It's coming from the probe ship, but the signal pattern is unlike anything we've seen before." The message was brief and transmitted in perfect human language. "You are different. We do not understand you. We will return to learn more." As the probe ship vanished into hyperspace, Admiral Kang realized that humanity had achieved something unprecedented. They hadn't destroyed their enemy, but they had confused. It made it uncertain. For a being that had consumed thousands of civilizations by perfectly understanding and predicting their behavior, uncertainty was a form of damage more profound than any physical weapon could inflict. "Send a message to Earth Command," he ordered. "Tell President Bay that the Great Devourer knows we exist, knows we're different, and that it's coming back to study us more carefully. Also tell him that our weapon works, but the cost is exactly what Dr. Choi predicted." The combined fleet began moving toward the edge of human space, where long-range sensors had detected energy signatures consistent with the Great Devourer's main force. Intelligence estimates suggested they faced an enemy with the combined knowledge and technology of over 3,000 absorbed civilizations, controlled by an intelligence that had been perfecting the art of galactic conquest for millions of years. But humanity had something their enemy had never encountered: the ability to inspire others to fight beyond hope of survival.